Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Anchor Holes. My name is Latoya, and today we are going to be doing a deep dive into First King 12. But before we get started, let's pray. Lord, the entrance of thy word gives light. I pray that as I open my mouth, I would speak with boldness and clarity in Jesus' name. Today, we are going to be studying a series. I'm going to be doing a series into the life of the King of Judah. And today teaching is coming from First King 12 from 1 through 19. But if you want to get more information into the life and reign of King Rehoboam or Rehoboam, as we are most acquainted with, you can go to Second Chronicle from chapter 10 through chapter 12, which will give you more context into the life of this king. And Rehoboam had power, potential, and a kingdom to lead, but one prideful decision shattered a nation. In this teaching, discover how pride, arrogance, and poor counsel led to the division of Israel and what it means for us today. Leadership without humility always costs more than we think. Let's go deeper into the word of God. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. And we see that hearing that Rehoboam's coronation ceremony was different from that of his successor, because when Saul, David, and Solomon was anointed as king, the oil, it was the priest that went with the oil and anoint them. But herein we see that in Rehoboam or Rehoboam situation, it's a little different. So if you turn to 1 Samuel 10 and verse 1, when Saul was anointed as king, 1 Samuel 10 verse 1, then Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon his head and kissed him and said, "It is not because the Lord had anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance." This is making mention of Saul. And if you go to 1 Samuel 16 and verse 13, this is when David was anointed as king. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. If we go to 1 King 1 in verse 39, when Solomon was anointed as king, 1 King 1 verse 39, then Zadok the priest took an horn of oil and out of the tabernacle and anointed Solomon, and they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, "God save the king." So we see when David and Solomon was anointed, there it said the horn of oil, but when it was Saul that was anointed king, it was a vial that was poured upon his head. We see that the first three kings of Israel, they were anointed, but in the instance of Rehoboam, he was appointed and not anointed by a priest, as we have seen with his three previous king in the book that we read before. And when you read chapter 1 King 12 and you read the first verse, it doesn't give you any context into what was the age of Rehoboam when he started reigning. But if you go to 1 King 14 and verse 21, it sheds some context into his age. And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonitess. So herein it said that Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. And when immediately as you looked at this, you are like, why Shechem? So even though Solomon was the wisest man, yet it seemed like Rehoboam didn't inherit any of his father's wisdom. And we don't know if wisdom is transferable, but we can see based on his first act as a king or his first decision, it doesn't seem like he is making a wise decision. But we see that when Moses was going to be replaced by Joshua in Numbers 27 and verse 10, we see that the Lord asks Moses to transfer some of his honor, some of his authority. So it would seem like this was a spiritual transaction being done. So in Numbers 27 and verse 20, it said, "And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient." Herein, God is saying to Moses, you need to put some of your honor, some of your authority on Joshua, because you have filled a big role, and Joshua is stepping into, he had big shoes to fill. And when your honor is placed on him, the people, the same respect and that they show you, they will show that same respect to Joshua as the new appointed leader of Israel. And it said that the honor of Moses, some of Moses' honor was transferred to Joshua, so that the children of Israel may be obedient. They may listen to Joshua as they have listened to Moses. So I am not sure if it's the same with wisdom, if it can be a spiritual transaction from one person to another, but we can see that none of Solomon's wisdom seemed to be passed on to Rehoboam. And if you read First King 14 and verse 21, it said, we made mention that he was 41 when he began to reign. And you think when you are 41, because they have this saying that the older you get, the more wiser you become, or the more knowledge, or the more they assume that you're wiser, but like with age come wisdom. So it's just an assumption. It's not necessarily that with your age you will be wiser, because some people it takes longer for them to mature, and so that's just like an assumption. And we know that probably if Solomon he had walked righteously and he had walked fully with the Lord all the days of his life, it is a possibility that he could have probably transferred some of his wisdom to his son. And you don't see here it make any mention, because when David was going to pass the kingdom over to Solomon, we see that he gave him specific instruction, like this is what you need to do. You need to walk with God. Let him be the one leading you. So he gave him direct guide. He gave him counsel, wise counsel, and all as a king he should live his life. But we don't see Solomon passing off any of those wisdom or passing off any of those counsel to his son, and or he should live as a king, or he should serve the Lord. And that could be because Solomon, in when he got older, it said because of all these wives that he married, they turned his heart away from God. So maybe he was not in the right frame of mind to even give any wise counsel to his son, and or to have him establish the kingdom once he become the king. And we see that Shechem, it said that he went from Shechem, and earlier we read that it said Jerusalem is the city which the Lord chose out of all the tribes. So if God chose Jerusalem out of all the tribe for his name, tribe of Israel, to put his name there, why is Rehoboam going to Shechem to be appointed as king by the people? And we know that Shechem is, the first mention of Shechem was in Genesis 12 and verse 6, where with Abraham we see that. So there is a significance with the word Shechem are the city Shechem. And in Genesis 12 and verse 6, it stated that, and Aram passed through the land into the place of Shechem, into the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Hebrew word, or the Hebrew root meaning of Shechem, refers to a place of burden or responsibility, highlighting the significance of this location for the coronation of Rehoboam. And Shechem hold historical significance because in Joshua 20 and verse 7, it was designated as one of the city of refuge. And it came to pass when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he was fled from the presence of King Solomon, and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt. Jeroboam had fled to Egypt because if you read in First King 11, that it said that Jeroboam, the 27, 1 King 11:27, he said, and this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Millo and repaired the breaches of the city of David his father. And the man Jeroboam was mighty, a mighty man of valor. And Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. And it came to pass at the time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and they two were alone in the field. The way that Solomon was living, and with all these wives that he had taken, and he was building all these shrine or these monuments, so or these altar that is wife they could worship their God, and the thing was displeasing to Jeroboam, so he spoke out against the king because of that. And Solomon didn't like that. As the king, Rehoboam was like, Jeroboam was telling him what to do. So because of that, there was a disagreement, and Solomon was trying to get rid of Jeroboam, and that's why he fled to Egypt. But know that King Solomon is dead, and Rehoboam is now the king, or he is getting ready to be appointed as the king. We see that Jeroboam came back from Egypt, and they said that they, verse 3, that they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came and spake unto Rehoboam, saying, so because of prior experience that they had with Jeroboam, and when they see that no, Solomon, who was a threat to Rehoboam, is now dead, that the people of Israel, they send messenger to call him all the way from Egypt to come, because I think he had a good standing. He was somebody that they looked up to, and he probably was upright. So they went and called him, and he came and he spake unto Rehoboam, saying, thy father make our yoke grievous. Now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy fathers, and his heavy yoke which he put upon us lighter, that we may serve thee. And we know that Solomon in his last days, it seemed like, based on this account that Jeroboam is giving us, that Solomon, although he had a peaceful reign, he was not like David. Like David showed compassion to the people. Here it seemed like Solomon was put in like servitude. He was like treating them as slave. And the people were like, you remember when they were in Egypt and they were groaning because of the pain that their taskmaster was putting upon them. So now they're being afflicted by the king and his labor that he's been putting on them. And know that there's a new king in town. They are trying to see if this new king can probably ease those heavy burden, those heavy yoke that was placed on them by the previous king. So they're trying to reason, to rationalize with the king to see if he could lighten their yoke, make their yoke lighter. And they're not making, like, this is not a bad deal that the people are giving. Like, we will serve you, just make our work, our yoke lighter. We will serve you. They didn't say, like, if you don't do this, we're going to do that. They're trying to give him a good counsel. Like, if you do this, we as your subject, we as your people, we are going to serve you. And he said unto them, depart yet for 3 days, then come again to me. And the people departed. So we see that Rehoboam, like, what he did here is something worth noticing, because he could have tried to give a judgment right then and there, but then he wanted to take some time so he can analyze to see what approach would be the best approach in order to answer his subject that came and proposed this proposal to him, what would be the best approach. And he said, go and depart from me in 3 days, that I will give you an answer. And we see that this happened, like, this is like a critical moment in the life of Rehoboam, because as soon as he is appointed as king, here comes this proposal for him to reduce their yoke. So this is kind of a test upon his leadership and his wisdom. And it said, and King Rehoboam consulted with the old men that stood before Solomon his father while he yet lived, and said, how do we advise that I may answer these people? So herein we see that Rehoboam, he first tried to seek godly counsel from the elders, because they had served under his father. So they should be more knowledgeable, subject matter expert with this situation that he's bringing up to them. And what does the Bible say about wise counsel? Proverbs 11 and verse 14, because we know that sometimes we have seen before in the Bible that sometimes we have people that give foolish counsel and it resulted into bad decision making. So in Proverbs 11 and verse 14, it said, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. In the multitude of people giving wise counsel, there is safety. They said there is safety in numbers. And where the counsel the elder gave Rehoboam was, and they spake unto him, saying, if thou wilt be a servant unto the people this day, and live, and will serve them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, then they will be thy servant forever. I think this is a pretty wise counsel that the elders are giving, because based on experience, past experience, they're saying, if you do this, we are sure that the people will do this in return for you, and they will serve you. But I think the part is said, if thou will be a servant, and you know that Jesus, he came, although he was God in the flesh, when he came, he took on a lowly servant, and it said he become obedient even to the death of the cross. Jesus didn't come sitting on a throne for people to serve him. He came so that he could serve others. So that is kind of what the people is saying. As the king, we are your subject, but if you serve us, this is a two-way street. Like, we are in this together. You serve us, and we will also, if serve you. So if you become like a servant type, where you have that humility, where you're humble, where you're not prideful, we will serve you. But he forsook the counsel of the old man, which they had given him, and consulted with the young men that were grown up with him and which stood before him. I think probably just the mention of the word servant probably didn't sit right with Rehoboam, because he's thinking to himself, I am the king and I have royal blood going through my vein. No, you are making reference for me to be a servant. And the elders, they're just making reference, like, if you, like a servant heart, the way you serve us, like as a servant heart. They're not telling him that you need to do the servitude, the hard labor as a servant. They want him to have a servant heart. That way he be more relatable to the people. He would be more compassionate towards the people because he will be able to see stuff from their perspective. But I think just the word servant, probably if they had said something else, then you probably wouldn't have any issue with it. But because they said servant, that word didn't sit well with him. And it said that he forsook the counsel of the old man which they gave him, and he consulted with the young men that were grown up with him and which stood before him. And he said unto them, what counsel give ye that we may answer the people who have spoken to me, saying, make the yoke which thy father did put upon us lighter? And the young men that were grown up with him spake unto them, saying, thus shalt thou speak unto the people that spake unto thee, saying, thy father make our yoke heavy, but make thou it lighter unto us. Thus shalt thou say unto them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loin. Herein we see that sometimes it's good to get like a second opinion, because you don't want too much option or too much choices, because then it make your decision even harder. So now when you see the counsel of the people that he grew up with, it's like a buddy system that if he don't take their counsel, they're probably not going to be his friend. And he, like, who would want that? So the older people, although they give him the wise counsel, he doesn't want to hear that. So now we see is the people that he grew up with, the young men that they grew up with, is giving him foolish counsel. And it's saying, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loin. So your loin is a good size. So if you're saying your little finger going to be bigger, that's how much he's going to increase their yoke. He's not going to take anything away, but he's going to add it. He's going to cause their yoke to be heavier than what is that had laid upon them. And now here, as my father did lay you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father has chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Herein we see that Rehoboam took the counsel of the young men that he grew up with, and he said, okay, my father make your yoke heavy, but guess what? I'm going to intensify it. And if my father used to chastise you with whip, guess what? I'm going to even make it worse. I'm going to chastise you with scorpion. And the Hebrew word for scorpion, it signified an increased severity and oppression. So now he's going to oppress them to the point that they probably cannot even endure that heavy yoke that is placed upon them. And so Rehoboam and all the people came to, so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king had appointed them, saying, come to me again the third day. And the king answered the people roughly and forsook the old man counsel that they gave him. Here in the third day is here. They came thinking probably that the king would take into consideration the counsel, the advice of the wise, the elders, but no, he took the counsel of the young men that he grew up with. And when he came, you think like before it seemed like he was soft spoken, but no, he's answered them in a rough manner. Like I could tell the people could probably detect by his attitude, by his answer, the way he's answering them, that this is going to go well for us. So it said that upon hearing the harsh response of Rehoboam, it said, wherefore the king hearkened not unto the people, for the cause was from the Lord. And because even we know that God's word have to fulfill that which he set it out to accomplish. So the counsel that the young man gave him, that was to fulfill what God had said unto Abijah. In 1 King 12 and verse 29, it said that in 1 King, I have this written down wrong, but this is basically when God had told Abijah in 1 King 11 and verse 29 that it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment. And they two were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces. He said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces, for thus said the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. So the thing that now transpire is to fulfill that prophecy that God had gave to Jeroboam back in 1 King 11 and verse 29 to 32. And wherefore the king, so when all the Israelites saw that the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse to our tents, or Israel? No, see to thine own house, David. So Israel departed unto their tent. So the people of Israel is like infuriated because they're like, we gave a wise counsel, you didn't take anything into consideration. So now it was like they were in a democratic government. Now it seemed like they're in a dictatorship, like he have become a tyranny to these people. And they were like upset to see that the advice they gave him, like he didn't take that into consideration. And so when all Israel saw that, but as for the children of Israel which dwell in the city of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. And King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute, and all Israel stoned him with stone that he died. Therefore King Rehoboam made speed to get up to his chariot and flee to Jerusalem. Rehoboam is like, oh no, because he sent like, this was like his entourage, this was like his counselor or his overseer that he put in charge at the forced labor, like for him to go and collect like tribute. But when he went, like because of what his response was earlier to the people, like they weren't having it, so they stoned him and killed him, because earlier they said like, what inheritance do we have with the son of Jesse? And they were furious and went to the tent because it seemed like Rehoboam was to consider their opinion, he was to consider them as the subject, are people that are affiliated and are of descendant of David. So it was like he was alienating them, so they were not having it. And all this time that I read the story of so Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. And all this time I read the story of Rehoboam, I was always under the impression that he was always this evil king. But then today, while I was doing my study into 2nd Chronicle 11 and 17, there was a period of time that Rehoboam walked with, it said, 2nd Chronicle 11:10. So they strengthened the kingdom of Judah and made Rehoboam the son of Solomon strong 3 years. For 3 years they walked in the way of David and Solomon. The priests, the Levites, that when Jeroboam became king and he didn't want he had set up the two golden calves because he didn't want the people to leave from Shechem to go to Jerusalem and worship God. He wanted to get the worship himself. So he set up these two golden calves as a distraction from the people going to Jerusalem to worship the one true God, and also that the people would turn to Rehoboam and he end up losing the 10 tribes that is now under his rulership. So when he did that, all the priests or the Levites that were worshiping God, he had kicked them out of that area, and that's why they went to Jerusalem. And now that they're in Jerusalem, they know the way of the Lord. So during those time that they were there, it said for 3 years they strengthened the kingdom of Judah And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, he and all Israel walked in the way of David and Solomon. And so they were basically providing mentorship and leadership to Judah and to Rehoboam on how to walk in the way of the Lord. And another part of it as well, we see that it mentioned that Rehoboam, that he had in Second Chronicle 12 and verse 13, so King Rehoboam strengthened himself in Jerusalem and reigned, for Rehoboam was um, when he had strengthened himself, that he did something, and I guess God probably gave a warning to him that he humbled himself. But then after he had strengthened himself, then he reverted back to his old ways. And as First King warned us of the danger of pride and disobedience, it encouraged us to seek wise counsel, be humble leaders, and prioritize obedience to God over personal power or convenience. We know that pride cometh brings shame. And the Lord said that he resisted the proud, but giveth grace to the humble, and whosoever exalted himself shall be abased. So when we stay humble, when we have that humility, then we can walk in agreement and in alliance with God, because it was pride that caused Lucifer to become Satan. It was pride that caused Nebuchadnezzar to eat grass. So when we're prideful, lead to it can lead to danger in our lives. So when we humble ourselves, God will exalt us. Even in difficult time, God remains sovereign and his will ultimately prevail. So we need to, as disciples of Jesus Christ, we need to strive to remain faithful to God's instruction and do not succumb to the allure of false God. Do not allure to pride, but be humble, have that humility so that God can continue to use us. I pray that as we study these words, we can learn lessons from these. And remember that God loves you with an everlasting love. Stay blessed and have a wonderful day.